Kelly Breland was going to try to call in this morning. I think he's on the line. Can we just confirm that? Mr. Breland, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm on the line.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
As far as the first agenda item, we have several new agency agreements. We have four for your consideration. The process is essentially the same for all of them, which is basically where they submit the request to join for Social Security coverage and our PERS retirement coverage through a joinder agreement, and we look at that, and there's a legal review to confirm that they meet the requirements as a public entity, and also a limited financial review. And based on both of those, these four seem to meet the requirements from the legality standpoint and also from the financial standpoint at this point, based on a limited review. And so with that, you see 2 pages or so of a write-up of information in your notebook and in the packet, and we would bring these forward for recommended for board approval. And the process is the same for all, but the details are for the Shady Grove Utility District. We recommend Social Security and retirement coverage with effective dates of December 31st, 2025 and January 1, 2026 respectively. For the town of Bolton, we recommend that they be approved for retirement coverage with an effective date January 1st, 2026. For the town of Scuba, we recommend they be approved for retirement coverage with effective date of January 1, 2026. And for the Pearl and Leaf River Rails to Trail Recreational District, we recommend that they be approved for Social Security and retirement coverage with effective dates of December 31st, 2025 and January 1, 2026 respectively. And unless there are questions, we would recommend the board's approval as discussed, or the committee's approval.
Any questions? No questions, I'll entertain a motion.
So move for the four.
Second.
Motion second that all four will be accepted. Any questions? No discussions. All in favor vote in signs of aye.
Aye.
Any opposes?
Aye.
No opposes, motion carries. Next item.
Thank you. We have one item under other. You should have, if you continue to flip in your notebook, one page with some delinquent contributions. We have two towns with some recent delinquent contributions, and would like to bring this to the committee and later the board, hopefully, for the certification of those delinquencies. I know in the grand scheme of things, the dollar amounts are not that large, but we want to be timely in what we present and bring, especially since employee contributions are involved as well. So we have the town of Goodman and the town of Chula, I believe is how we pronounce that. And you can see there either October, November, or in one case, September, October, November contributions. And we pause and certainly be happy to discuss or answer any questions. But if not, we would like to ask for your approval and certification of these delinquencies for the numbers that are shown there. For the town of Goodman, 4,958.31, and for the town of Chula, 15,601.92. And certainly apologize for adding that on short notice or at the last minute. And I understand if you want to pause or discuss that, and even if you want to defer that. But we wanted to make good use of the time and of the board's time, and maybe try to avoid a special meeting. And we certainly didn't want it to go to February, since the contributions are involved. So with that, appreciate your consideration. We'd like to ask for your certification.
Questions? I'll take a motion.
Motion.
Second.
There's a motion and second that each will be certified. Any questions? No questions. Those in favor vote by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposes?
Aye.
No opposes, motion carries. Committee.
Thank you. Yep, that's it. All right.
Is the audit committee next?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll call the audit committee meeting to order. We have a couple of items on our agenda this morning. I think the first item on our agenda is an internal audit update and plan, and I think Mr. Higgins is going to cover that this morning.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you will, you should have an update that looks similar to this. It's probably in the back packet, the back little pouch of your notebook. It's a 2 or 3 page internal audit update. This is the meeting each year where we typically go over a brief update of the internal audit function and results and what our focus has been, along with the external audit, which you'll hear from and hear about momentarily. But our internal audit program this past year focused mainly on employer audits and employer compliance, which is very important for the information that is remitted to PERS. It's done two ways. One is by Bailey, which is our independent external auditor, and they do some employer audits really associated with GASB requirements. But in addition to that, with our own internal audit function, we do more employer audits. And the Internal Audit Act for Mississippi allows for the outsourcing of that internal audit function, if you will, and we do that through HRK. And between the two of them, HRK and Eide Bailey, there's the focus with some of the numbers you see in the update on the employer audits. I think the total number is a little more than at the time this information was prepared, but when they're doing it, and you can see a brief description of what we focus on one of the slides, but it's a focus on the employer information, such as the contributions, such as the required forms, rehired retirees, covered and non-covered positions, things like that. And based on some information from calendar year 2025, roughly 6,000 was recovered, either actual recoveries or expected recoveries per audit. So may not be that much money in the grand scheme of things, but it's important to follow up and do that with the compliance. As far as on one of the last pages of that slide is what we have planned for this, or that packet for the upcoming year. We think it's important to continue the focus on employer reporting and employer audits because so much of the information that we receive does rely on the employers, whether it be data, forms, or contributions. So we plan to continue that focus with a goal to hit each employer once every 5 years. So that's our plan, to continue to focus on that and maybe even expand our scope, looking at some of the required information and contractual services. And with that, just wanted to provide this for your comment. There's no action required on this plan, but we do need to show the update and the plan to the audit committee once a year. We typically do it this year. So we'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we could move to the act.
Any questions by the board or others? Yes, sir.
The, on the plan work for 2026, I think it is critical that, that we get out and audit our members, our employers. So I personally think we need up to additional staff to do that, to give it the level of importance that we should place on it. So how many staff do we have currently dedicated to the external audits, the employer audits? How many are full-time doing that? And if they're not full-time, why not? And if we need additional staff to accomplish this, I think we need to amend our budget request to the legislature when it goes over to have additional staff.
Sure. Well, certainly appreciate that question, that point. I agree. I was thinking something similar myself, and I think we probably can increase our efforts to some extent with the existing budget. So we'll be happy to look at that and do that and report back to you. Next time we do the budget request, we certainly can keep that in mind. I do agree with the importance and like I said, in enhancing that. From memory, and I have Mason and Caleb with HRK behind us in the audience. If I say something that's materially incorrect, please let me know. But I believe we have with HRK 4, the manager and plus 3 more. And one of those dedicates 75 to 100% of their time, maybe 75 to 90% of their time. And then some of the other staff is probably less so. But we can certainly look at that and increase their time. I think a full-time equivalent, probably if they were dedicated to it with HRK, probably can do a little under 100 a year. So 4, not counting some of the staff with PERS and employer reporting, and we can increase that, and we'll look to do so.
So how many entities do we need to audit? It seems like I read the number that we have 800 employers.
That's right. It's over 800 employers. That's correct.
We've got 800 employers that we need to do. So that's the reason I brought that forward of additional staff
Sure.
to do that.
I agree. We can look at, we'll make that happen one way or another.
Dr. McCoy, a question of ignorance. Does that give the semblance of we're examining ourselves?
I'm sorry, you'll have to
Does
say.
that give a picture that we are examining ourselves
Well,
rather than an outside source now?
this is an internal audit is what it actually is. The employers actually are responsible for getting us correct information. So this is actually an internal audit that I would view it as, which is looking at ourselves to make sure that we're getting what information the extended part of PERS reports to us is accurate. Yeah.
But that doesn't affect the outside audit that's
No.
looking over
No.
our shoulders.
I don't think so.
Okay.
The next group can address that though. So,
Well, I certainly think if we're going to amend our budget, that would probably need to go through the administrative committee. Is that the group that normally approves the budget?
It would, and of course, we submitted it for this year, but if agreeable, we can look at that. And I believe within our existing budget, because it's in contractual services with the audit firm, we probably can add some resources there. If agreeable, I'm happy to do that and report back, and then you could decide if it's going to be a full-time position, expansion or something, how to do it.
All right. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir, Mr. Senator Sparks. Sorry.
Thank you. A couple things that you mentioned. One is, I know you talked about contractual services. I know as a legislator, I would probably like to have a narrative maybe of the trends we've been seeing. I think that might be helpful with us in considering legislation. But when you're auditing, just for my understanding, are you auditing for proper remission of contributions? And are you also auditing based on eligibility?
Both, yes,
Okay.
both. Yeah.
Do you audit, because we're talking about employers, correct?
That's right.
All right, because gross payroll is kind of the big issue when we look at it instead of getting into individual contractual services. But since ORP are also employers who are employers of the PERS system, are we also auditing ORP for eligibility? And if so, how often? When's the last time we did that?
Yeah, I don't have that exact answer off the top of my head. I will say, I'm going to ask Mason or Caleb if we've had any ORP.
Last time we looked at ORP was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
But we will certainly add that in there because they are an employer, and we'll make sure that's in part of this expansion.
Yeah, because I would strongly encourage we look at eligibility, because there's been a lot of question about who's eligible for that and the expansion of that. And as I understand, ORP is to a great degree a creation and governed by this board as it relates to the regs as I read them. And I just want to make sure I've requested on more than one occasion from our IHL employers a list of people who are in ORP by classification, by department, by job title, because I'm kind of doing my own little audit of whether people are properly in that program. But I would definitely like the professionals to look at that and weigh in as well.
Sure, we're happy to do that. And in my mind, there are 2 or 3 separate related things, but happy to respond to that and excellent comments and questions. As far as the audit, we'll make sure that's folded in as far as these particular audits that are done. And part of the reason that probably it's been a few years that we looked at those is because in this context, it's just 9 employers of the 800 and something, but we'll make sure and circle back for sure. Separately, on what I think some of what you're asking about, we've already began a limited review of some of the questions around the ORP plan document. And as we move through the year and probably once Tier 5 moves a little further along, probably bringing that to something for the board to consider, which I think is probably some of the questions you may be talking about. And then internally, even though I'm not prepared to give a status update today, but we began after last year trying to modify some of our systems to collect better information, and we'll be able to give that at some point in the future. And so we'd be happy to do it.
Other questions or comments from the board or others? Okay, that action doesn't require any action by the board. It's an update only. The next thing that we were going to cover on our agenda, at least, is the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR. You should have a copy of the annual comprehensive financial report it's a large bound document in your materials this morning, and I'll recognize Mr. Higgins again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and he did an excellent job describing it, so you should have your ACFR there. And at the proper time, we would like to ask for your approval of that, just to formally get that in the record. But just briefly, before I turn it over to Mr. Burrows with Ida Bailey, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. And we had another good year financially from a reporting and auditing standpoint. I had a good report and a clean report. And I'll let Mr. Burrows talk about that more momentarily. But just want to thank you for your leadership and the opportunity. And I especially want to take a minute and thank all the staff involved. And it was very important. I mean, I have a great appreciation for accounting and the work that goes into that with the finances. I know many of you do as well. And it's just so important, I think, that we're able to continuously complete and have a clean set of financial statements as the years go by. I definitely don't want to take that for granted. And I want to thank the staff, thank you, the staff overall, not only in accounting, but the others, because it is a team effort. And in many ways, we have some people who are either new or relatively new in their positions, and I don't want to start calling names. I may leave somebody out, but just want to take a minute to thank the staff for doing that and the work where we continuously get recognized by the industry for our efforts in financial reporting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brad.
Perfect, thank you. Good to see you guys again. My name is Brad Burrows. I'm the partner on the engagement. You guys should have my presentation inside your board book.
It's under tab E
Thank you.
in your board book, I believe.
So I'll reference the slides as I go. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I also would like to thank management, not just management, but the entire PERS organization. We hit just about all of them when we're doing our audits. So I really wanted to thank everybody for their time and efforts. We come in, we've got a lot of requests, and they help get those to us timely and accurately. So want to thank them as well. So slide 1 is our title page. Slide 2 kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. Geographically, we do have a new one being added here on the East Coast here shortly. That'll be announced in about a month. But with that, government is our largest industry. And so because of that, we are allowed to specialize in certain areas. So my specialty is PERS, so I don't do any other state or local government. It's just PERS systems. So it is nice to be able to come to you guys and understand what you guys are talking about and be able to help provide additional value just from other clients that we serve as well. On that note, slide 3 kind of gives you more background of the entities that we work with. We picked up a couple of new ones this past year. So always good to pick up new work. Slide 4 is the audit team. Abby is the senior manager. She's been on it for several years. And then we also have obviously senior and staff that aren't listed, but work with your group to get the audit done. We also have an IT group that works with your IT group. They're not doing a full IT audit by any means, but covering what we need from a financial statement audit perspective. And so please report that there weren't any items to address from that review. We also have an internal actuary that we send the actuary reports to. And so they're not obviously doing a full calc by any means, but they're looking at the assumptions, making sure that what you guys are using is in line with what we see in the industry and our other clients as well. So no issues there. We do use an outside specialist called Harvest, and that's really for pricing of investments. And so we'll send them just independently price certain investments. Also want to point out we're very cognizant of confidentiality. So when we send those investments over, they don't know which clients that they're working for. And so in their mind, they're just providing a price. So, but with that, it's a specialist, so required to communicate that to you. Moving on to slide 5, lists the different reports that we currently issued so far. And the main one obviously is the ACFR. We also do another examination report for the MRS, the muni plans. Happy to report it was a clean opinion, unmodified is the technical term. No issues to report, no findings or control deficiencies. Those would be reported at this point if we had anything that was significant. Also, there was no new accounting standards. There was one new one that was hitting state and local government quite a bit. It's compensated absences. We evaluated that it was not significant to your organization, so not material. So there really is no significant changes for that. We do have one past adjustment, and that was really a reversal from last year. And so last year it was associated with the muni plan. And so since that journal entry wasn't made, The reversing impact has a $318,000 impact to the current year. 318,000 itself is not significant, but for the community plans, we're dealing with smaller numbers, so that's why it's being reported. But really nothing new. It was a prior year issue and just required to communicate a reversal impact to that. So moving on to slide 6, this is really kind of defining managers' responsibilities. The next slide is our responsibilities as auditors. But really ultimately, if you look at that several hundred-page document that is the ACFR, really only a few pages of that is ours. You know, the rest of it comes from management or their third-party consultants. But with that, you know, it's really management's responsibility to make sure that processes and controls are in place, that things are reported correctly, and that obviously they're providing information to us in order to facilitate the audit. Looking at slide 7, our responsibility then is to come in and provide an opinion on those financial statements, and with the concept of materiality. So we're giving an opinion that those financial statements are materially correct. And then obviously if there's any issues, those would be communicated to you as well. Moving on to slide 8, we have our required communications. Really, you know, touching more on the materiality. Our job is to provide reasonable assurance, but not absolute. And so if you wanted absolute, we would be testing 100% of the transactions, which I don't think Mr. Vincent wants, nor anybody else. But with that, you know, we're giving a concept of materiality. We're also not doing an audit of internal controls, but we are evaluating them as a part of our process. So if anything came up, that would be reported to you as well. The other piece to really focus on this slide is independence. Independence is at the front of our profession, guiding our principles. So please report we have no independence issues or concerns there. Moving on to slide 9, really these next 2 slides are discussing what we consider significant estimates. This first one is alternative investments. As you guys know, those are not priced. Those are not easily priced, I'll say. You know, you can't just look those up on a stock market. So because of that, we do a lot of work in this area, getting into audited financial statements from each of the funds, making sure that what the PERS portion that goes in there is accurate. There's also what we call a roll forward process to make sure that cash transactions are being reported correctly. And then there's also a delay in what we call a true up. And so there's generally a 1 to 3 month delay in when valuations are trued up after each quarter or each month in some cases. But because of that, we want to make sure that those values are getting inputted into your system, reported accurately. So we do a lot of work in that area. The other significant estimate is your net pension liability. So part of that is we're testing the inputs, which is your census data. And so that's where GASB 68 comes in that you guys were talking about for employer reporting. We're auditing employers. As was reported previously, we tested 33 this year. We test the amount required by GASB based on the guidance provided with that standard. And so with that, we're testing in the inputs that the actuaries are using to perform their calculation. The next piece of that is we review the assumptions, which I discussed previously, where we review the assumptions used in that calculation to make sure that they're reasonable and in line with industry standards. With that, we'll move to slide 11 with financial results. The next few slides are really just talking about overall how the organization did, focusing on your main plan. So the rest of the information is available in the ACFR if you want it, or I'm happy to discuss offline if you have any questions or questions now. But obviously happy to report 11.34% return. As I mentioned before, there's no journal entries during our process. So really what you guys have been reported and provided from your third-party consultants is going to be consistent with what we're reporting as well. So overall, obviously, I like to see a positive increase in net position. and making, I'll say, strides towards reducing that net pension liability. Looking at slide 12, slide 12 talks about really your contributions, distributions, and then how does that line up with your investments. So your investments and contributions, obviously you want those to be higher than your distributions. But obviously good things to report overall for the past several years. So, and then slide 13 kind of shows a trend for the last 4 years with what you're saying with your net pension liability, pretty consistent. In our ACFR, there is a 10-year schedule. And so it is pretty interesting to see, I guess, what that's done in the last 10 years with the improvement that you guys have done there. So obviously good to see. Slide 14, we do have some work that is still outstanding. That's not unusual. Our focus is getting the ACFR issued, and then generally towards the end of December, early January, we'll issue the GASB 68 allocation report. So that testing is nearly complete. We're just down to the reporting elements at this point. So no issues or concerns to report with those reports. The last item I'd like to address is on slide 15. Really just like to keep you apprised of any significant new standards that are coming up that might impact the organization. 103, which is a reporting model, really be more significant for state and local governments, but for you, the most significant impact is really just going to be MD&A, with the main concept of getting away from boilerplate language. You know, they don't want that language essentially rolling from year to year. With the nature of your investments, you guys do have to update that more regularly than some other organizations. So I don't see it having a significant impact to you, but it will be something that we address for next year. And that concludes my prepared remarks. If you have, I'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you for the report. Are there any questions on the annual comprehensive financial report or the report on the external audit results? Hearing no questions, we do have two items I think that we need to take a look at. First, the staff is recommending approval of the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, and I'd entertain a motion to do the same.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. The ayes have it. The second thing would be approval of the report that we received this morning on the external audit, and the staff is recommending approval of the external audit as well, and I'd entertain a motion.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those, any other questions or discussion? All those in favor of approval of the external audit signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Do we have any other business to come before the audit committee?
Just one thing, I'd like to thank Brad and his team for their work. I appreciate their efforts in helping us get everything completed timely. And then also just for the board's awareness, we've certainly enjoyed working with Audit Bailey, and hopefully that could possibly continue, but it is time to go out for an RFP for the external audit function. So that's something, unless there are any concerns, it will be starting after the first of the year probably. And we certainly hope that Audit Bailey will compete for that and see how that works out, but just wanted to make everybody aware. But other than that, we appreciate your time.
Any other business from committee members? Mr. Higgins and Brad, thank you for your work on this. Mr. Higgins, congratulations on another clean audit year, and thank you for your staff, and please express the board's thanks to your staff for all their hard work as well. With that, we will adjourn the audit committee.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll call the administrative committee meeting to order. Mr. Higgins, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. This one, as you can see by the agenda, is primarily for actuarial reports and presentations. So I'll be here, of course, and may have a few comments later and will be available for questions. But if agreeable, we'll just turn that over to our friends from CAVMAC, our consulting actuarial firm, and they'll be discussing and presenting the information on all of the plans, but then the reports for PERS, Highway Patrol, and MRS. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Coburn.
got an hour and a half till lunch. Yes. What's that?
Might be by yourself.
All right. Yeah. No, I think there's between all the reports, about 800 pages of reporting. 17 different plans, but we have condensed all of the material down to 95 slides. Most of that, or about a third of that, is appendix. So we're only going to go through about 60 or so slides. But we really want this to be interactive. Please ask questions as we go. We've got a lot of numbers. I'll introduce my team here. There's a new face on our team. Wendy Ludbrook is a consulting actuary with CABMAC. She's been with us now for about to be her 7th year. She is out of St. Louis, so she didn't just drive down the 55 route. She decided to take some planes, though, yesterday, but I think it probably would have been faster just driving down 55. And then Darby Caraway, Darby, she's been on the team for a number of years. And is responsible, is kind of the project manager for all of these plans. We're going to do a lot of musical chairs. I want them to get the opportunity to be in front of you all as well today. So you don't have to listen to me drone on for an hour and a half. I'm just going to start here at the first page, and we really don't ever talk about this first page, but our marketing team, when we rebranded, we really talked about what we do as actuaries, and this picture really, I was thinking about it this morning as I was preparing my remarks, is really true to PERS. It really is. We really see the future of PERS being really smooth, and the past of PERS. And we're in this period right now where we've got some things to work out, but we're here to help that. We are that person there trying to smooth out this road that we're currently on. So I thought that was kind of poignant for this picture. I'm going to take you down memory lane now for 2025. It was a busy year. For sure, for all of us, for all of these guys here, and for all of you and all of staff. Just to give you a reminder of what happened in 2025, in the legislative session, the Mississippi legislature passed House Bill 1. It established Tier 5, which was a hybrid plan, combination of DB and DC plan that starts for folks hired on or after March 1st. So we're coming up here on a couple of months until we'll get the first Tier 5 members. Created a new tier for the ORP plan as well, and additional funding into PERS due to that new tier for the ORP plan. And it closed the supplemental legislative retirement plan to any new members, again, as of March 1st, 2026. And I mentioned that here, although we're going to talk about PERS first, because when we get to the supplemental legislative plan, you'll notice if you've received reports, you haven't received a report for the supplemental legislative retirement plan. We have things to discuss regarding that plan and regarding the funding, the future funding of that plan. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, give a little bit of actuarial 101 and give our recommendations for there. You were busy in February. The PERS board adopted a new funding policy where the recommendation for the contribution going forward would be the ADEC method, or the actuarially determined contribution method, as provided by the actuary in their report. And then finally, we were here in April and back in June where the PERS board adopted new actuarial assumptions. So we got a lot going on this year, and we've got a lot going on in the results. So I always like to give the answers up front and then kind of dig deep into the weeds. But here are your key findings or highlights for the PERS valuation. And we do a valuation and a projection study at the same time. So this is the valuation as of June 30th of 2025. Where did we stand? As Brad mentioned, we had a good investment year. I'm sure you've heard that from your staff as well. He mentioned 11.3%. Just depends on how you do the math. We assume mid-year cash flow contributions and benefit payments coming in mid-year is an easy calculation. So 11.2 is what we got. I'm sure your staff has the actual return, so it could be a little bit different. Last year was 10.4, so now we've had 2 good years in a row. So that's great. And out of the 5 past years, we've had 3 good years, 1 really close to expectations, and then 1 really bad year, where we had a negative return for the year. But on a smoothing basis, our return is 9.1%. Now, we assume 7%. So we're going to see when we go through the gain loss analysis for PERS and for all the plans, we have an actuarial asset gain, which we haven't seen in a little bit. So that's good. We saw one a little bit last year, but this one's a little bit more significant. So this really helped the results this year. This was one of the factors that really helped the results. The funded ratio increased. We had kind of been level there. Then when we made the actual assumption changes a few years ago, we dropped down to 55%. But now we're heading back in that right direction, which we want to see. But we're going to show in the projections that we don't increase to where we want to, or what the actuaries really want to get to. So again, like we tell you all the time, we currently have a statutory contribution rate, which is legislatively adopted, and that is phasing into the 19.9% of payroll. So what we do as actuaries is say, okay, we have an unfunded accrued liability. How many years will it take if we get that 19.9 to pay it off? Assuming, we continue on as we go. Well, that will take 42 years. All right. Last year, when we did that calculation, it was just under 45 years. So we're improving. It's an improvement, but still a little bit further than what we would recommend. Mostly due to the changes in assumptions that we went through and the board passed in June was the reason why that number came down. Now, our answer to the question of the actually determined contribution is we're calculating, and we'll go through these in more detail, but right now we're showing 25.98% of payroll based on the funding policy methods that the board has adopted. Last year, if you recall, we were at 25.92. So just a small little increase there in that rate. When we take the ratio of those two numbers, the ADEC and the statutory contribution rate, we have an ADEC ratio of 130%. And we'll go through the metrics of that on the next slide. So as far as the projections go, obviously we have to look at where we're headed, not just where we are. So our short-term projection shows that the unfunded actuarial accrued liability stays pretty much where it is over the next 5 years. This was heading even higher in last year's results, heading towards $30 billion based on current contribution expectations. So again, good result here in comparison to last year's results. The funded ratio, however, you can see a little bit of an increase, but kind of still hovers under 60% over the next 5 years. The cash flow does get worse. Those negative numbers are getting worse. That means it is in 2030, 5.2% of the cash flow is negative when you compare it to the assets of the plan. Okay, if we get 7% return on our investments, we cover that negative 5.2% there, which is good. That means our assets are growing, but we want to keep that cash flow to a level where we can be sustainable and grow assets even further. It's okay to have a negative cash flow. Most mature pension plans in the public sector do. That's okay. But we want to limit to where that negative cash flow is headed. And then you see on the last column there, the ADEC SCR ratio is increasing. So when we look out longer term to our 2047 date, which is what we have in the current funding policy, our funded ratio is 63.7. So not a significant increase in the funded ratio from 56.7 where we're currently at over the next 22 years. So we're kind of going to see, we'll show you a graph of it, but it kind of levels off until it tail ends at the end, which is the graph you guys are accustomed to seeing. The negative cash flow, the minimal negative cash flow that it gets during the projection period gets to negative 6.2%. So again, not below negative 7%. So in our projections of the assets, we still show that the assets are growing. But as we always do, we show you some sensitivity around that. And if there is a bad investment year in the next few years, where does that headed? And it's not a pretty picture. So again, the ADEC SCR ratios are provided there as well on the longer term. All right. So I'm going to pass it to Darby, who's going to come up and kind of go through some of the data slides and the asset slides for you.
Hi. So these are the valuation results as of June 30th, 2025, and we're going to go back to the beginning and really show the process of calculating all those numbers and what goes into all of those numbers that Ed shared. So for actives, we did see a decrease of about negative 800, but we are still above 145,000 active members. And then we saw an increase of about 1.3% for retirees. And that active to retiree ratio is still 1.2, which we just like to keep an eye on and make sure we don't get too low. Moving on to payroll and benefit payments, again, two really key items to the valuation. Payroll is currently above $7.4 billion, which is about a 2.7% increase in payroll. And benefit payments are above $3.6 billion. That comes to an average salary of above $51,000 for active members. And in comparison, last year was $49,685. So it did increase for average salary. And we did see a slight increase in average benefit as well for about $28,000. Moving on to asset values, which is, of course, another key component to all of those results. Ed mentioned 11.2% on a market value of assets and a 9.1% increase in assets on the actuarial value. And that's the number we compare to 7% when you're looking at that investment gain or loss. So as Ed mentioned, it's going to be a gain. He steals all of my fun facts. This slide really dives deep into how we are calculating that actuarial value of assets. It's a little confusing, but it is the methodology that is popular among public sector retirement systems, and we use a 5-year smoothing. So we compare the market value return that we expected to what we actually returned. We take the difference and we use 20% of that for the next 5 years. So 5 years of returns are going to be built into that actuarial value of assets. And since Ed mentioned 3 of those are positive and 2 are negative, we do have a positive number there, which equals that 9.1%. And then giving kind of a heads up for next year, you see that 2021 was a large gain and it will be fully recognized next year. And then the 2022 large loss will still be there. So if we see a 7% market value of return, we if you get exactly 7%, we expect a 5.3% actuarial value of asset return, which will be a loss. So just to look out for. Moving on to kind of putting all of those numbers together, and we look at present value of future benefits for all active members and all retiree members. Everybody's lifetime, we look at all benefits that we expect to be paid out, and we come up with $67.4 billion. We then look at the current assets of almost $35 billion, which does make up more than half of that present value of future benefits, but we have to come up with a plan for paying the rest of that off. So we have $4.7 billion that we expect incoming from member contributions, $1 billion in employer normal cost, which is what we talk about in all of those employer contribution rates. There's always the normal cost, which is the ongoing cost of the plan. So $1 billion attributed to that. And then that leaves $26.67 billion in the unfunded. And that is what Ed will discuss on you guys' plan to pay that off. And in comparison, that was about $26.5 billion last year. Next, Ed also stole my thunder here, talking about the funded ratio. Here it is just for 7 years. You can see it was about 61%, then we saw that drop, and now we are working our way back up. It increased by 0.8% to 56.7% for 2025.
I got a question, if you could.
Yes.
On looking at the census data, since 2019, we've lost about 5,600. And do we know if we know those positions were lost in contributions to PERS? Do we know whether or not those were outsourced and we lost them through outsourcing, or were they completely eliminated and those responsibilities assumed by others?
I'm going to open that up to the PERS staff to answer that question.
Okay.
We know who's there, but we don't know, like, what the reasons are for the movement.
And we don't know exactly what happened at each of the 800-plus employers. It's probably a combination. But one thing I will mention during that, not to sidetrack too much, but during that same time period, I think generally, and I can't quote each year by year without looking, but the payroll upon which the actual dollar amount contributions are based has increased during that time period. So as far as the actual dollars coming in or the contributions, the head count went down, but the payroll increased just as information. But to your question, we don't know exactly.
But yeah, I can understand that payroll may increase through increased salaries and that sort of thing. But if we had an additional 5,000 paying over the years, it would be significant. So if there's outsourcing going on in some manner, legislators might know that that is absolutely a loss to the system. And that is part of the ongoing issue with that, even though we've started adding a few employees back over the last few years. But I just wanted to point that out, that outsourcing could be an issue that is having an impact on us. And again, all employers.
And that was the basis of my question
doing
earlier.
Garbage and buses and all of that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure we all understood that could be an issue.
And on that point, I agree with you, and that's why I asked on the audit if they could give us some narrative of what they've seen over the last few years of outsourcing. But I can tell you, it's my understanding we have about 2,000 open pens in K-12 education. We have about 300 or 400 in probation and parole. We have probably that many again in correctional officers. In other words, we have open spots across state government that are unfilled for a myriad of reasons. Local employers, law enforcement, fire, we don't have their data as much because we don't have their internal mechanisms. But that's why I have been very interested in a return to work policy because of these empty pens, and we talked about this last time. If a pen is empty, we're collecting zero in contribution. You bring up bus drivers. That is a serious issue across the state, and particularly in my district. because a bus driver who wants to come back is limited to 25% of his high four, or 50% work, 50% pay. The problem is that bus route needs to run all year. And so I agree with you, and we're trying to find ways to get more people into that because gross payroll does matter. And Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the actuarial negatives that you reported to us earlier this year is that the state has given raises in excess of, I think, the 2.65% that you had in your assumption, which has a negative actuarial impact, but it is better for contributions.
Yeah, it's definitely, we talked about that last night at dinner, is, payroll increases that are given to individuals, they hit the liability right now, right away when they're given. But down the line, the funding is better for it because you're getting the 9% employee money and you're getting this SCR money on top of that. So yes, payroll hits you first, but the long run is, and CABMAC just wrote a paper about that. So we will definitely forward that to you, talking about that exact thing. So anybody else?
I do get confused when you're talking about losing employees because there's a positive and a negative to that as well. But have we looked at some of our larger employers and what they might have done? I don't know that we have recently. I know we had a couple of larger employers that had moved some people to non-PERS covered positions. I say moved, that's a poor choice of words probably, but did we do any kind of formal review of that?
We, maybe not formal, but we have, I'm not prepared to mention the specifics off the top of my head, but we can look into that and refresh our memory or do it again and get you that information. But you're right, there are several that have done that, especially in the healthcare arena. Well, I know with UMC being the largest employer, and they're one that has a collaborative approach where they can do things, and maybe some of the other hospitals as well.
My recollection, that was a function of state law as well. They were not necessarily usurping the system, but they had specific authority to go and do what they did.
That's exactly right. It was a healthcare collaborative, and I think there's one that allows other hospitals the possibility to do that as well or something. But yeah, you're exactly right.
In that regard, I think you're 100% correct. It was a legislative creation. I think it was also a legislative intent that we had empty beds at UMC, and they didn't want them coming back asking for a deficit appropriation, but they wanted them to populate the beds, and that was the genesis of that program. But the main thing is payroll, and as you know, we want all state employees to have increases in pay and raises. But it is counterintuitive when we give, for example, a teacher pay raise, which has been discussed again this year. It has a negative impact on our unfunded actuarial liability, but it has a great impact on the state of Mississippi and our educators.
Yeah, so great segue into this slide because the second line down here shows what those salary increases that were given for this past fiscal year did to the liabilities. So those, again, the benefits that the retirees receive are based on their final average pay. So when pay is given now to any active members, that is projected to their retirement date. And so, but the liability hits the PERS today. So those salary increases that were provided that Darby went through, that was a little bit more than what we expected. Again, they're given, but what did the assumptions say it was going to be? It was a little bit more than that, and it increased liabilities by $188 million. So that hits the liabilities, but again, it helps the funding down the line. You see there on the first line, the investment rate of return that Darby showed, $684 million gain. So that was good. That lowered the unfunded $684 million. We've got some small movements here for service retirement disability, mortality, really small. I think we made the joke again at dinner last night that the mortality assumptions was dead on. We got a chuckle. It was that funny. That's actuary humor for you. But withdrawals and new entrants have some losses. The biggest line that I want to talk about is contribution deficiency. So this is the difference between what the actuary is calculating, what we would like to be put in, the ADEC, versus the SCR. And so that difference is about $445 million. So that hits the unfunded calculation. Doesn't hit the liability, but it hits the unfunded because it's not in the assets. We would like it to be in the assets and it's not. So it does hit the unfunded. And then yes, sir.
On that particular line, so a layperson would look at this and say, PERS was underfunded last year by $445 million.
Based on the actuary's recommendation, yes. Based on the actuarially determined contribution. It was still funded, but based on what we've requested to be put in versus what has been put in, it was underfunded by $445 million, yes.
Yeah, I have a question. How would an infusion, would any government infusion affect that?
Yes.
All of it all?
Yep. Yeah, whatever is put in is going to hit that asset amount. And we're going to show you those scenarios that we showed you back in October. We're going to show you those scenarios today here as well. So,
Ed, if I may just a second, because I want to be very fair on this, because I get asked this all the time, and I know people watch this, and Dr. McCoy just mentioned it. A layperson hears what you just said, and they believe we've underfunded by $445 million. And then when I go home, that layperson's also known as a constituent. They're also known as a local school teacher or somebody in the PERS system. To be fair, and you correct me on any of this that I'm wrong, in 2017, this board adopted a funding policy recommended by the actuaries that chose an arbitrary date of 2047 to pay PERS to 100% funded. Is that correct?
that is correct.
All right. And from 2017 until 2024, the legislature took no action. There was no change in funding policy to my knowledge, no cash infusion, no change to a tier. Nothing happened for 7 years.
That's correct.
All right. But what did happen actuarially is we had a 7.75 rate of return assumed. And in 2021, when we had this huge return of 32 some odd percent, the funding policy that was adopted by the board led us to buy the rate down, that assumed rate of return, from 7.75 to 7.55. Is that correct?
You're
Okay.
batting 1,000.
Which changes the liabilities, because in the future, we're only shooting for 7.55 is our benchmark, our target assumed rate of return. Then in 2022, the year that we had the tremendous loss, was it 8 points? It was
Something like that.
So, okay, so
8.2, 8.6, something like that.
which is a huge hit to the system. The recommendation, and the board also in that same year voted to further lower the assumed rate of return from 7.55 to the current 7, which is about $4.4 billion by my calculation. All of those.
One correction, we did it the following year.
Okay, all right, sorry. So, well, in that situation, I guess it's a fiscal year, return year versus actual year, but roughly around that time.
We did it in 2023, yeah.
So when we look at our charts and graphs and we see that increase in liabilities of, $4 billion, that has to do with an actuarial change the board adopted, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So that layperson at home does not know all that. They don't know that everything you're talking about, funding requirements, ADEC, that is all for the arbitrary 2047 100% funded goal. That doesn't mean the system is in duress. It just simply means that, and this board has the authority to make that funding policy. But then the legislature has to vote as it relates to funding. And I'm trying to be fair in saying that if a constituent asks me, why didn't we put $445 million more dollars into PERS this year to meet that graph or chart, the issue is that we're 22 years left on a 30-year policy that was adopted in 2017, and the legislature did nothing until 2024, and we put in $110 million. And then in 2025, we brought Tier 5, which the board had asked for a Tier 5 for 2 years. We ended SLRP, which is not a financial huge impact on the system. It's just a bad look, in my opinion. So we ended it, and we reformed ORP. So we also raised the employer contribution rate by 2.5% over 5 years. So those things, it's $110 million of cash we put in. As Representative just mentioned, we're certainly looking to do a funding bill this year. The 2.5% increase when fully implemented is approximately 186 million new dollars a year that's going in. The ORP reform is about $3 to $5 million annually and grows by about $3 to $5 million annually. And then the last thing, and I'm asking you because you're the actuary, you're the expert, and I tell people this, and they look at me with a funny look. So that's why I'm going through this, and I appreciate your patience. But the Tier 5, there's a confusion because when they see 4% going into the DB, they think they have taken a 5% hit to money going to pay the UAL. And that's not accurate. That's going into a defined contribution. But the actuarial difference for Tier 5, as I recall, is 1.89% more of payroll in Tier 5 will go to pay off the UAL than under Tier 4.
Can't confirm that 1.89, but that does sound correct, that there's going to be more Tier 5 payroll to go towards helping pay down the unfunded because of the structure of Tier 5 is a smaller portion of the normal cost that Darby was talking about earlier for Tier 5, yes.
So all your numbers I know are accurate, but the key thing that I wanted to make sure is that there was a cash infusion in 24. There's 186 million more annually coming in by the increased employer contribution rate, 3 to 5 million annually, growing 3 to 5 million annually on the ORP reform, and an amount, I believe it's 1.89 was in your numbers, more going to pay off Tier 1 through 4's UAL from the Tier 5 creation. Is that fair?
Yeah, and you know, we'll get into it in the projection slides, but yeah, all of that is included in our projections. All the additional ORP money that's coming in, it is part of our projections. Just estimates of what we think will come in from there. We have the increase in the SCR to 19.9 eventually. We're getting an 18.4 now, but those are all into our numbers, so yeah.
Thank you.
And the 5% that is going into the DC plan has a negative impact on cash flow initially, and it will reduce the amount of assets, but that is more than made up on the reduction on the accrual of the liability.
Correct, yeah, the 5% that is not coming in from Tier 5 payroll, yeah, it would be nice to get it all into PERS, but you know, it's not, doesn't have that detrimental of an impact to PERS where the 1.89% does over time.
And being fair, what you're saying is absolutely correct. And the Tier 5 puts more money to paying down, but that also comes at the expense of my grandchild getting less retirement benefits. So that's another thing that the layperson will say is the legislature chose to do the Tier 5 so there would be more money going paid down the liability expense of the future retirement of my grandchild. So, I mean, all of that's true, and we've talked about that ad nauseum on the board, quite honestly, but the numbers are what the numbers are. And I'm interested in seeing what the actuarial numbers are to pay off the liability, what is the only guarantee that current employees and current retirees will get the debt that is owed to them is us to have a pathway or a plan. And actuarially, that's what I'm looking for here to pay off that liability. So I appreciate the information and all, but you know, if you, I think fair is fair across everything, and every side has fair. So, you know, and I understand that, and it is what it is. Part of it I voted for, part of it I didn't vote for. I mean, that's just it, but it is what it is, and that's what you're reporting today is on the numbers that are. So.
And the biggest part of that, I'll agree with you, Dr. McCoy, and I hope to see improvements as we go through. But this board owes a fiduciary duty to tier 1 through 4. You don't owe a fiduciary duty at this time to a yet unhired future person. You owe a fiduciary duty to the plan, and I think that's why this board chose to ask for a tier 5. I don't want to speak for them, but I'm assuming that's what it is, and it's why the actuary supported that. So I think we all want a stable, strong, well-funded retirement system.
All right. All good? We're going to move on. We're up to slide 13. All right, so just an allocation, we've talked about what these numbers are, but the allocation of the SCR for this year is the normal cost is 2.52% of payroll, and it's been coming down as, again, we don't have any tier 5 folks yet, but it still is coming down as we get more tier 4 folks in this plan, and tier 4 is cheaper than, say, tier 1 and tier 2. So that wasn't anything, right? Okay, sneeze or something. And then for the 19.9, and we use the 19.9, we know that's not what's being put in right now, but we know that is the ultimate SCR. The difference of the 19.9, the 2.52 is the 17.38%. That is what's being used to pay down that unfunded, and that is what we're telling you will take 42 years. If that is the only thing that is put in to PERS, it'll take 42 years to pay that off. Again, a time in the future, but again, just not something that the actuarial community can kind of get behind at this time. So what we do is we come up with what we call the actually determined contribution period, where we have this layered amortization of all the gains and losses that have occurred since we set this up in 2018. And we have an amortization schedule for all of these bases. And so we've had mostly or all losses every year, unfortunately, just due to the nature of this plan. This year, there's just a small little loss of $156 million. And just for example, to pay that off over 25 years, this year you would contribute just over $10 million. Those numbers on the right-hand side are based on a level percentage of payroll amortization methodology, and they're anticipated to grow by 2.65%. So we're going to get into, when we talk about the SLRP plan, the difference between level percentage of payroll versus level dollar. But for now, let's just leave it at what is needed to pay off the $26.6 billion is $1.834 billion based on the closed amortization of about 22 years now. So that comes out to about 23.46%. We add that to the 2.52% to come up with the 25.98% ADEC rate that we are recommending that be put in for the fiscal year that begins July 1st, 2027. All right, so that's the VAL. Let's jump right into the projection results. So now the projection results are everything going forward. We do 30 years of VALs going forward at what we know today is being contributed. So we're not talking about ADEC anymore. That's our recommendation, but we know that's currently not what's being put in. What's being put in is the phasing into the 19.9%. So this is Dr. McCoy's favorite slide. I'm glad he made it back for it. But this is just kind of look at every 5 years or so, 10 years, total payroll, what we anticipate total payroll to grow to, what we anticipate the unfunded actual liability to grow to. And you see that the unfunded, pretty much stays within this 26, $28 billion mark. Again, much different than what we showed last year. We were showing increases over to $30 billion last year. So again, this is a good year's results in comparison to where we were 1 year ago. Still work to do, but it is a better looking thing. And that's all a lot to do with the assumption changes that we made and the investment rate of return that we got. So the funded ratio that our bogey for 2047, it comes out to 63.7%. We've highlighted that in yellow. And you know, a lot of other numbers there, but that's basically what we're looking. In 2055, 8 more years past there, we get to about 77.1%. So again, that's the impact of Tier 5 and the helping of the funding for the ORP and other things that were a part of HB1 is that kind of tail. This is all those numbers in graphical form, that tail up in those last 5 or so years of the projection period. That's when we're getting the Tier 5 people who are retiring from PERS. And that's, and where a lot of the baby boomer generation has since passed in those years. And, you know, the funding, the 19.9% may be okay at that point going forward. Again, still, it would take another 12 years to get to 100% funded based on our current valuation. This is another metric we look at is the negative cash flow. I kind of already teed this up, but this is our projection of where we see the negative cash flow going over the next 30 years. Again, assuming the statutory contribution rate. Again, getting down to -6, -6.2, but then starting to come back up towards the tail end of this projection period. And then the last metric we look at is the ADEC versus the SCR ratio. Again, this is if this 19.9 continues for all years, there's going to be, from our perspective, a shortfall in the contribution that keeps that unfunded at those levels you just saw. And if we have a closed amortization period, which we've set up in the funding policy, the ADEC gets larger. So we're not talking about 25.98%. We're talking numbers that approach 40% of payroll. Again, as we get to that. Once the ADEC, we think, would be paid off in about 2048. We would return to levels right around the 19.9%. So again, this is just kind of, this is the recap of what we showed you earlier on the conclusion of results. Now, what we've added is a couple of slides here to this presentation is to kind of show you if the actually determined contribution is made every year, where would we be in 2047? Well, we've got a little bit over 22 years based on our amortization period left. So if the ADEC is put in every year, we get pretty close to 100% funded in 22 years. By 2047, we're looking at a 99% funded ratio. 5 years later, you're talking about 108% funded ratio. And then the cash flow, if the ADEC is put in, you know, or is able to be put in each year, the lowest cash flow is this year. This would be the lowest year. That cash flow line would not go like this, or your perspective this way. It would go up towards 0 is where we want it to go. So the cash flow would be the lowest part. And again, this is everything in graphical form.
Before you leave that
Yes.
last slide,
Of course.
would you tell me how much the 25.98% of annual compensation is in dollars?
About a
Approximately.
about a $450 million increase over the 1990.
It is $2 billion. The employer contribution ADEC of 25.98 would be about $2 billion.
It's spread over those years.
Well, it would be increasing as payroll is increasing.
Okay.
But right now, if we looked at it,
50. Okay.
if we looked at it for this fiscal year, it'd be $2 billion.
Than the 1990.
The
Our
19.9,
payroll was 7.7 billion, so we're 6% different than the 19.9, so about 450 million.
you want me to add another line on your graph to add dollars? All right, so when we were here, I was here in October. I spoke in front of the House Select Committee for PERS, and then I presented 2 days later to the PERS board on some alternative or additional funding scenarios that the legislature may be considering for this next legislative session. So we've gone and just kind of redid our numbers based on this valuation and these projection results. And these scenarios keep the statutory contribution rate at 19.9, ultimately getting there, the phase-in of the 19.9, but it includes or implements a lump sum of additional contributions to PERS on an annual basis. So we've got 5 different scenarios here for additional funding. The first 3 scenarios bring in $1 billion in total extra money into PERS. And they're just broken down into different buckets of how we do that. So the first scenario here is $500 million this fiscal year, and then $50 million for this fiscal year and 9 others. So adding up to a total of $1 billion. So again, going back, I should have put the baseline results here, but getting to 68.8 and getting to 86.4% in the 30 years we would get to with this additional funding. Just so you have it, if you want to make a note, the baseline is 63.7 and 77.1 in 2055. So if we put in $100 million in each of the next 10 years, again, another $1 billion, but spread over 10 years, 68.1% and 85.1% funded ratio. $1 billion all up front in this fiscal year actually is better. If you put $1 billion in, is actually better, potentially, if the return is good. The bad part about potentially putting in $1 billion all up front is if it's a negative investment year, that could really be detrimental. Then you're not getting even a benefit of that $1 billion, you know. So again, we talk about bonds, POBs, and putting that in, you know, but we like kind of the approach of putting in smaller increments, but in more years. We see that kind of layout better potentially on an investment perspective. The other 2 scenarios are just other scenarios that we kind of, staff and I and others came up with, but it's basically putting in, what if we put in, if the got in $200 million in the next 30 years. So this is like $6 billion, a lot more money coming in than just $1 billion. And that helps the funding. We get to 77.6% in 2047 and 105% funded by the end of the 30-year projection. And then the last scenario was $500 in now and then $100 million in for the next 30 years. And a little bit less money coming in total, but you see the funded ratio, the projected funded ratios. There's the scenario there. So I'm sure that's going to open up some questions, so happy to answer any.
Did y'all run the 200 million over 10 years?
We did not.
Okay.
We can, easy enough.
I'd be curious.
I could have that.
I mean,
for you.
Back at the napkin, kind of looking at math here.
Yeah.
It'd get, what, probably at the end of 10 years, around 90-something%.
Yeah. If you're talking what did you say? 200 billion, 200 million for 10 years, so 2 billion in total?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you're talking about 92%
Yeah,
in that.
in my head, it was like 93, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, back to the napkin.
That's a good number.
Okay.
Just to confirm, but that wouldn't get it to that ratio in 10 years. It'd be 2055.
2055. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we are done with PERS. Any other questions with PERS? We're just done with PERS, man. Sorry.
So right now, the PERS employee, those that are working, active employees are putting in 9%. And employers are putting in
18.4% right now in this fiscal year, but it'll go up, yeah.
So the employers, I'm just gonna say, are putting in about 2 times what the, about 2 times what the employee puts in. Okay.
All right, we will go, I promise you, we will go through the other 3 plans a lot faster, okay? We'll be done in 20 minutes, all right? Wendy, you got 10 minutes. All right, Wendy's gonna do highway patrol.
All right, so I'm just going to run through the highway patrol. The slides are very similar to what Ed had, but the exciting thing, actuarially at least, is on this first slide. So the market return is about the same for all the plans. So 11.3% on market value return for this plan, and around 9.1% for the actuarial value of assets. The actuarially exciting thing, though, is the conversation that Mr. Sparks and Ed just had about payroll and how it hits the it kind of hits the liabilities now, but then in the future it also helps. This is an actual real-world example of what we just talked about. So highway patrol had about a 9% increase in average pay last year. We're expecting more around like 4, maybe a little over 4%. And so because of that, all that extra increase in pay went right into the funded ratio. And so the funded ratio kind of stayed flat. It went up from 65.5 to 65.7, even with the good asset performance and everything. And you'd think like, oh, we had a great year in the markets and all that. Why didn't we get a little bit more in the funded ratio? Well, it's because the pay, all those pay increases kind of get put into the liabilities all at once. However, now we look at our projected results, these next 2 bullet points, and this is where we're looking out over the next 30 years to see sort of what the funding period would be and also what the funded ratio would be. And you can see that under the fixed contribution rate, the funded ratio, or the funded period, came in at 28.2%, which is almost 5 years lower than it was last year. And that's because the increased pay now is leading to bigger contributions and more employee contributions coming in over the projected period.
All those just take a one-time hit and then it's off.
Yeah.
It's a one and done.
One time. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then the funded ratio is coming in now at 87.9% in 2047. Last year was 80.5%. So you see a really big impact on these projected results, even though the current plan at June 30, 2025 kind of didn't get to see as big of an impact. On the next slide here is just the pie chart of this is the present value of all the future benefits for the current people in the plan. It's $783 million. You can see the assets covered, almost about 60% of it right now. Member contributions in the future that are expected to come in will cover $24 million. Employer normal costs, which is the benefits accruing into the future, it's about a $58.4 million piece of it, and then the rest of it is those unfunded payments that need to get that we work on paying down every year. The gains and losses, so every year we look at what we expected to happen versus what actually happened. This is very similar to the PERS, except it's a little more exaggerated. The investment return, $9 million increase, but the salary increases was a $12 million loss, and that's a pretty big chunk for this plan. The other pieces, the retirements and mortality withdrawal and all that, was sort of a little bit of a gain here, a little bit of a loss there. The other, we don't have it specifically separated out as we did in the PERS, but that $2.3 million includes a contribution deficit because the actuarial determined contribution rate is a little bit higher than what the fixed contribution rate is. And then it also just other miscellaneous kind of data adjustments and things like that fall into that category. And then finally, the assumption changes that all the plans got last year had a negative 2.4 million impact on the liabilities. On the next slide, we're just looking at what's happened to the funded ratio, and you can see kind of a high point in 2021. In 2022 was very similar, and then we had the down markets coming into fiscal year 23 that sort of dropped everything down, and then we've been sort of steady right there, but we're starting hopefully to build back up with these last 2 or 3 years, I guess, of positive returns, and then we've got, I think, one more year of holding on to the 2022, getting that 2022 negative return out of the actuarial value of assets. So slide 31, this is just the fixed contribution rate and the pieces of it. You can see the employer rate, the normal cost, that 18.25%, that's the cost of benefits that are accruing over the year. That piece of this contribution rate is the same for both the ADEC and for the FCR. But then the UAL piece is just a subtraction. It's the difference between the fixed contribution rate is 49%. We take off what our normal cost rate comes in at 18%, and we end up with around 30.83% for the to pay off the unfunded. It's sort of like what's left over to pay off the unfunded. And you can see that bumped up just a little bit from last year, but the normal cost also went down a little bit from last year. So at the end of the day, the total rate between the employer and the members is about 56.3% coming into the plan. This slide now, though, now we're specifically looking at the ADEC. So for the fixed contribution rate, we are the unfunded portion of the contribution is just a difference. It's just the difference between the normal cost and the fixed rate. But for the ADEC part, we actually calculate it, and it's that same layered amortization. In 2023, we took the entire UAL, and so we're going to amortize that over 25 years. And then every future piece of gains or losses that come in each year is going to get its own 25 years of amortization. So you get the first big chunk, the 2023 piece, and then we're expecting that each following year it'll just be a smaller up and down. Hopefully they cancel out. Some years you'll have a gain, some years you'll have a loss, but those should be just a much smaller piece. So for this year, the far right column, the 16.38 million is what the amortization payment is in dollars. However, this plan gets the motor vehicle fee reduction, which right now we're assuming it's about 3.2 million based on the last couple years of what it's come in at. So the total amortization payment for the employer is about 13.1 million, 13.2 million, which comes in at 33.08%. And so the development of the ADC here on slide 33, again, the employer normal cost at 18.25%. It's the same in the...
Excuse me, go back to the previous slide, if you would. That MVR fee reduction, is that what is called the diversion that the legislature did? Is that what that is?
I don't know if I'd call it a diversion, and Mason, you may could speak to this a little better, but it's essentially a dedicated revenue that was placed in a statute that goes to this system. It's like motor vehicle reports.
I think the legislature may call that a diversion because it was coming into the general fund, and then that was diverted over to the highway patrol. I was just wanting to make sure that I understood where that is. Is that what it was? Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the pieces of the actually determined contribution for this year compared to last year, you can see the 18.25%, the accrued liability piece that we just calculated on the previous slide of the 33.08, so that comes to 51.33. It's about 2% less than what it was last year, and it's still a little bit higher than the 49.08 fixed rate. So that ratio of the ADC over the FCR is 104%, still in that yellow range, which is as long as it's between 100 and 110%, we're in the yellow range. And then the payoff period based on the for the unfunded liability based on the ADC is 23.6 years. If you remember, for the FCR, it's 28.2 years, so less under this method. And that actually shortened as well from 24 to 25 by maybe about 0.7 of a year. Projection-wise, so now we're going to look into the future. The yellow highlighted piece on the slide here is kind of the main thing we're looking at. The funded ratio in 2047 is expected to be 87.9%. Again, last year was expected to be 80.5%. So that's just this increase in payroll really helped to improve that. And you can see that now we're expecting to be 100% funded by 2055 if everything goes as planned. Down at the bottom, you can see the cash flows are expected to stay in a -3% to -2% range, which is great. That's in the green range for this plan, so that's a good metric as well. And then here it is in picture form, and you can just see the blue is the actuarial value of assets. It's you can see how they increase, and then as the assets are going up, you can also see the decrease in the unfunded liability, and the funded ratio sort of follows along and gets up to right around 100%, around 2054, 2055-ish. So finally, for this plan, the funded ratio in 2047 is 87. We're expecting it to be 87.9%. That's in the yellow range. Cash flows -4.2%, green range. And then currently, the ratio of the ADC and the FCR is 104.6% in the yellow range. However, that metric says you dip into the red range if that number's more than 110%. We're expecting next year to be 109.2%. So it's possible that within the next couple years we may go over that threshold, and then we'll have to discuss what needs to be done to bring that back down. So that should be it for Highway Patrol. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. One more. Just to make sure, on the recommendation here from the actuary is that the fixed contribution rate stay at 49%, and I think the member's contribution is 7.25, so the employer in this particular plan is paying about 7 times more than the contribution of the member. Just
right.
Round off numbers. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, we'll quickly go through just some risk assessment things we talk about as far as investment returns and stuff like that. So we always kind of want to give you the warning of what we could potentially see. Risks are not all bad. We could see good risks with investment rates of return. So we give you a broad range here of projected funded ratios for single year events. And this really, if you look back at last year's, like Wendy said, we were at 80.9%. But if you went back to the 11% return in 2025, it showed 87.9. So we kind of predicted it with the return. So that's these, you can see, I don't know, you probably talked about what return you're looking at from yesterday. You can kind of see where are we heading. If we're heading towards that 11% return again, next year we could be here for PERS talking about a 70% projected funded ratio. That'd be fantastic if we get another good year.
These are the PERS sensitivity numbers.
I got PERS and Highway Patrol here on this slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So again, these are all in your reports. But again, we kind of look at different things. We do look at some bad things. If we simulated the 2008 loss, both of these plans would be in pretty rough shape, projected funded ratio wise. But just keep in mind this stuff. We talk about demographic risk, about population. We talked a little bit about where the population has been. So we kind of look at this and say, well, what if we stay static? What if we decline even more? That does hurt. That does hurt based on our conversation earlier. It does hurt the funding if that continues to decline from the 145,000 in PERS and the 508 in the Highway Patrol. Just some assumption risks around the discount rate. We're not suggesting lowering the discount rate any further, but again, if it kind of warranted that going forward, this is kind of where you'd be. And then if an additional 1% is put in above the 19.9 or the 49%, I know we talked about additional lump sum dollars, but what if we put in 1% of pay into, you can see that would 1% increase would improve the projected funded ratio, and a 1% decline would decrease it as well, about 5% either direction for PERS. All right, so that was just quick sensitivity. Again, it's all in your report. Please read through those. Let's turn our attention to the supplemental legislative retirement system. So again, just to remind you, House Bill 1 closed the supplemental legislative retirement system. We're using, similar to PERS and Highway Patrol, is we're using a level percentage of payroll amortization method for the funding of the SLRP plan, okay? But by closing it to new active members, we don't have an anticipation that payroll is going to grow, right? And for PERS, even if we're declining, we're still anticipating total payroll to grow. If you shut off the valve and shut off payroll going forward, that payroll is going to decline. Everybody agree with that? If we got 174 active members, next session, people win, people lose, we're down to 150. No new people who won is in this plan anymore. We've got 150 active members after the next session, after the next vote. We've got a lesser payroll, right? So we can't use this methodology anymore of level percentage of payroll. So there's an option out there called level dollar amortization. I'm going to show you some graphs just so you can see the picture of it. But it basically is similar to your mortgage, right? It's basically saying I want to put in the same dollar amount to fund off my debt. That's what level dollar is. But it puts more up front. Okay, I'm going to show that in a graphical form. So again, I think I kind of set these up of what level percentage of payroll amortization, but this is just looking at a picture-wise, your unfunded actuarial liability versus your payment. So if you had a $12 billion unfunded, on level percentage of payroll, if you closed it and tried to pay it off over 30 years, the red line there down at the bottom, you can see is increasing. So it's really low in the first few years, but then it's increasing by that payroll growth assumption. But in those first few years, actually you have negative amortization. Your unfunded grows. Even though you're making your payments, the unfunded does grow. So when you look at level dollar, you have that same $12 billion unfunded accrued liability. Now look at the red line. The red line is flat. It's higher than it was in year one, than it was in the previous graph. So that means you got to put in more money now, but it's level. We get rid of this as putting it as a percentage of payroll, because when you divide by payroll and your payroll is declining, that rate is going to be astronomical soon. In a few years, when your payroll is, say, $2 million versus what it is now at $9 million, right? So we can't use this methodology anymore. So we're recommending a change to the funding policy and to the mechanism of paying the contributions into this plan to keep it sustainable to this level dollar amortization. So now I'll go through the results. That was kind of your Actuarial 101 lesson on that. So again, like we talked about in other plans, assets were good, funded ratio increased, the amortization period is 22.9%. But what we're recommending is that the contribution, the ADEC coming in, be a dollar amount. We're going to get rid of the rate of pay, since pay is going to be declining going forward. So what we're recommending is $894,000 be contributed in this next fiscal year. And again, we haven't issued a report yet, but this is just our initial findings. We first need to change the funding policy before we can issue a report if the board agrees to this methodology. All right, and we can come back in February and do that. If we did put it as a percentage of payroll, because payroll right now is not declining, payroll actually went up this year, you're looking at about 9.22% of payroll. Last year, we were right around that 8.4, and that's what the fixed contribution rate is 8.4. So this is obviously, as a percentage of payroll, more than that. And actually, if you followed the current funding policy, you would have to increase the 8.4 because you'd be more than 10% above it. all right? So we're right at the 110%.
So that
Yes.
only applies to the active members, this funding policy change?
No, it's to the unfunded liabilities, which is shared between all actives and retirees. It's the total liabilities.
Well, maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. If the legislators that are active
Yeah.
are currently paying 3% toward their retirement.
Yeah.
And if the amount that the employer, who is the legislature, is paying 8.4% right now.
Right.
Okay, that's 3%, but if we're going to 9.22%, and it's going toward that liability, I understand that, but that means that the legislature or the employer will be paying 3 times their contribution rate to get down their liability. So I was just trying to make it fair so that the amount that of the liability of the PERS where the employer is only paying 18 and going up to 19.9, that we get those numbers fair to increase. So I was just trying, so if we go to 9.22, that'll be an increase in the percentage on the rate of pay, right?
It would, but what I'm saying is I'm not really recommending 9.22% of pay be contributed. I'm recommending we go to a dollar amount. And so that dollar amount for this year would be $894,000. If you take the 9.22% times the $9 million payroll, that's what that comes out to, okay. $894,000. But
I think people understand dollars amount more than they do the percentage amount. So I would be leaning toward that, even with the recommendation of the percentage for PERS, that it be a dollar amount too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to the legislature to figure out how much and how often and over how many years, but the dollar amount is critical. Okay, I think you've explained it, so I understand now. Thank you.
Just for PERS and Highway Patrol, using the level percentage of payroll amortization methodology, you can keep the ADEC as a percentage of payroll because we expect it to kind of grow with payroll. But if it's supposed, the dollar amount's supposed to grow, but the percentage rate ADEC hopefully would stay the same or similar. This $894,000. The good news, well, I don't know if it's good news, but with a declining active population, the employer normal cost is going to go down every year because you'll have less active members, though the accrued liability piece is about $596,000 here, that fourth number down on the right-hand side to pay it off. That, if we get gains and losses over these layered amortizations over the next few years, this $596,000 will stay level. We're not increasing the right-hand column. Those are the dollar amounts. So to pay off this $7 million number on the first line, we need $608,000 every year for the next 23 years. Doesn't change, $608,000. Doesn't increase like we saw for PERS and for Highway Patrol. It stays the same. So if we get gains and losses that equal each other out or zero every year going forward, we only need $596,000 to pay off the $6.9 million debt. And the normal costs will be declining. So the actual contribution going into this plan will actually, in dollar amount, be declining. The 894 is the highest it will be. Again, assuming no big losses that occur for the amortization period.
So a question, Mr. Higgins, is that Ed mentioned February, waiting till the February meeting. Would not the change in the funding policy be such that we would need to meet again sooner than that so the legislature would have that? I mean, that, you know, the session's going to start in 20 days and they'll be divvying up money and doing that sort of thing. So the sooner we get over there to know what closing this is going to cost, the better it would be, would it not?
We could, I don't think it's necessary, be happy to do as the board would see fit, but the reason I say that is several reasons. One, let me just go ahead and mention this as it relates to SLURP, because we've talked a lot about the methods and the amounts and on. With PERS, a lot of times the dollar amounts get very large. As I understand it, as far as the closure of the SLURP plan to new members, that was really more about policy than dollar amounts. And I want to emphasize, and I want Mr. Coble to confirm, but I think if you put a dollar amount increase annually on everything that he's talked about, I think it's roughly 119,000. Is that right?
Increase, yeah.
Increase. So just to put it in perspective as far as the dollar amount, the reason we were recommending February or at some point in the future, since this is a change and since it's different, to come back, present to the board, have the board have a chance to ask questions, and then make the suggested revisions to the funding policy and finalize the report. And then to the earlier part of your question, the two reasons I would say it's not necessarily required, I'm happy to meet, but don't think it's necessary, is one, I think the legislators and their staff are getting the information for planning purposes now with the presentation and with the information. And then also as a reminder, and this is true with PERS too, the actual effective date of any potential increase per the evaluations are at fiscal years that start in the future. So in other words, there seems to be ample time. Did you follow?
Yeah, this $894,000 does not have to be contributed till July, starting, the fiscal year starting July 1st, 2027.
Okay, 24
So
months.
we've got a whole year
Okay.
to get this number. That's why I said come back. We've got time in February to get this done and still get the numbers in for the budget for the fiscal
Making
year.
sure that this information gets out.
Here.
I think that the discussion and that sort of thing is, and I understand now more about it since the 24 months would apply to this change to the funding policy as well. But I think a letter needs to go to every member of the legislature that tells precisely what the actuary has told us and the percentages and the dollar amount, so every member of the legislature will have in their hand what is done here, and not rely on them watching the video or getting the information from leadership or whatever. I think it's incumbent upon us to provide that information to every member, and also every member of PERS in our support group. So I would think that needs to be done as well. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to take part of your hour and a half. You still got 13 minutes.
Don't blame me, but.
You got 13 minutes. Yeah.
You got 13 minutes.
And to be fair, the 894 is a gross number that you have calculated. That's not including the contribution. There's a spread between what actual contribution you receive. And I want to be very clear, any member of the legislature that's in a SLURP program, I expect to continue to pay their contribution.
3%.
Yeah, and the employer needs to pay their contribution. So I think when we have a conversation about funding policy, I'm not changing, I'm not taking away the contribution obligation.
Oh, no.
The spread would be what we're actually talking about, and that may have been the 100 and some odd thousand you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're taking $894,000 annually and infusing that with an appropriation. You still got to count the contributions because legislators still going to have to pay their contribution.
Oh,
Okay.
this is the ADEC. This is the actually determined contribution, and this 894 is going to move, but hopefully it doesn't move too far around that. Hopefully it declines because normal cost is the portion of it.
And if you have gains, it tends to change, but
Yeah.
the legislators still got to pay their
And the
part, and the
legislature
employer
still
has
has
to pay
to.
their part. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely on that. And I think you said earlier that you would project that maybe it would eventually, it would go down. But absolutely to your point, and I'll just go ahead and say, the way I can sum up the recommendation that will be coming about the funding policy is just simply to say, due to this change, that part of the funding policy has the method, the board adopts a method for the contributions. So instead of being percent of payroll or level percent of payroll, it'll be level dollar. And that's in a nutshell, that's the recommendation. That's all it'll be. Right.
All right. We are on to the municipal retirement system finally. And thankfully, we only have one slide on it. So this, this plan has been closed since 1982, 80 something. It's been closed for a long time. So we only have about 1,270 retirees left. There are no active members in this plan left. We meet with this group tomorrow via Teams. We tell them what their millage rates are to contribute, but they're basically contributing, but we're running this plan on cash flow projections only. And we want this plan to have enough assets, basically, to pay their retirees. But when that last retiree is left in each of the 17 municipalities, we don't want to have too much assets, right? We want to just kind of go into the distance and pay the retirees and then have zero left. So we come up with this methodology where we come up with millage rates for each of these groups. Just a summary, some plans can grant ad hoc COLAs for their retirees. The Tupelo group did grant a 2% ad hoc benefit increase for most of their retirees this year. We base that millage rate on assessed property values, so we get that information from each of the municipalities on their property values and their homestead exemptions, and we develop the millage rates based on that and based on our projections. The assessed property values for 11 of the municipalities grew. That's fantastic, and decreased for 6 municipalities. We assume zero growth. So when we have increase in assessed property values, that typically leads to a lower millage rate. Only one of the municipalities this year, Macomb, needs to increase its millage rate for the fiscal year upcoming. And again, that was due to their experience. They had some bad experience. This plan is invested similarly to PERS, so we're getting very similar asset returns on their money as well. So again, we go through a 20-page slide presentation for them tomorrow, but again, that's all in your appendix if you wanted to see this. So this is everyone's favorite slide, and I apologize for going over my hour, but I still got you in time for lunch. Yes, sir.
In the appendix, there is a wonderful slide that you have on cash flow that goes out through 2055 that has the total contributions, projected benefit payments, expected investment returns, and cash flow. All of that gives you great information, especially when people start talking about the danger of the PERS system becoming insolvent. If you take that and do a little mathematics with it, it gives you confidence in the system itself. So that's the one that I have used when groups have asked me about how close are we to insolvency. And of course, then I also have to go back to that risk page as well. And but that particular slide right there.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Yes, that is the one that I was talking about. It doesn't want to stay up there. There's too many numbers on there.
I think so. We're not synced here. That's funny.
It's page 63 on your deck, in case you're wondering.
It's catching up.
Oh, okay.
While it's catching up, just one
There it
quick.
is.
Oh, go ahead. One quick question. I am surprised on what, and this wasn't on the deck, how fast, because you all I know are checking turnover, but looking at one of the charts you had here, by 2030, we'd have 64, you're projecting 64,000 new entrants. And then in 10 years, 97,000. So we apparently aren't keeping people.
We get
long
16.
time.
There's 16,000 new PERS active members each year. I mean, we've seen that consistently, and about another 3,000 rehires into PERS. So yeah, the 64,000 doesn't surprise me how fast the turnover is here. We talk about that all the time. We have decrements, 35% of people are leaving in the first year that they are at PERS. That's what we're seeing in the data. It's pretty significant. So yeah, tier 5, you'll get a lot of tier 5 members, and you'll have over 50% within the first 10 years.
Yeah, Bill,
But we'll be in tier 5.
you'll be almost at 50 and 5, if that number holds.
Yeah. Yep.
Mr. Higgins, I believe we need to approve these reports, is that correct?
Yes, sir. All except for Slurp.
All
We'll
right.
come back to that in February.
Board members, you've heard the reports. Can I get a motion to approve the PERS, Highway Patrol, and Municipal Retirement Systems report as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, motion carries. Any other business,
No,
Mr.
sir.
Higgins?
No, sir.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Benson?
Good time.
1 o'clock? Yeah.
1 o'clock.